Hello, good evening. I'm just making a quick video following requests from several people to comment on a news story which is doing the rounds today, and certainly making big waves amongst my friends, for example, on Facebook. And many Archaeosoupians, it seems, are equally bothered and frustrated and annoyed by this news story. If you know what it is, you already know what I'm about to say. In fact, I suppose the title of the video has given it away. And that is, it's to do with Stonehenge and the so-called Druid king, Arthur Pendragon, and his protest against plans by English Heritage to make use of human remains in the upcoming visitor centre at Stonehenge, the much needed visitor centre at Stonehenge. Mr. Pendragon, as he's referred to in the news article, has actually brought this issue to court previously and lost in court. He's done various protests, most recently in Bristol, trying to highlight the plight of what he sees as being, I suppose, about decency, but also actually directly about Druidic interests and religious interests at the monument. So he claims that the bones and cremated remains recovered in 2008 are part of a royal line, presumably the royal line of which he is resurgent, as it were. A direct quote from him is that people buried in the ring around the stones were put there for a reason, as guardians. Without them, the religious element is taken away from the site. All you have left are rocks. Now the counter argument which has been made is that authenticity is crucial. English Heritage are quick to point out that they're not going to use remains which have been recently recovered from the site. They're actually using remains which were recovered, for example, in two cases, around about 50 years ago. But also as well, they say that the public expect to see human remains, and I suspect by using the term authenticity, they're referring to more than just the material of the remains. That is, why can't you use a facsimile in the book? Because I think they're hinting that perhaps Arthur's claim is not an authentic one, although they do restrain from actually saying that outright in this news article. Now, Arthur Pendragon goes on, I suppose, as his counter argument to say that this is not just about Druidism and this royal line as he sees it. It's also about decency, and he does ask why it is that people aren't being left to lie in this monument. Why are they being dug up at all? He says this is not just a pagan issue, it's about decency and respect. And well, I suppose this is where this argument has hit Facebook, and this is why people are discussing it, because there are actually two sides to this story. On the face of it, and let's just get this out of the way, on the face of it, Druids have nothing to do with Stonehenge. The connection with Stonehenge can be very directly linked in with essentially the imaginings of John Aubrey. In the 1660s, he wrote about megalithic monuments. He was doing a study, and he supposed that these monuments might have had something to do with Druids, perhaps that they were built by Druids and were part of this ancient religion, this ancient cult, this ancient thing. These ideas were picked up by William Stukeley, an early archaeologist and antiquarian, and he went on to write a book, Stonehenge, Restored to the British Druids. And in this book he popularised this notion that Druids and Stonehenge are somehow intrinsically connected. But this connection is demonstrably made up. It's demonstrably fictitious. Now, as you're well aware, I'm a proud Welshman, and at the National Eisteddfod we have a tradition of having Druids, a wing of Druids, or of the Druids, who preside over the festivities there. And that's a very real modern institution, and so is the modern cycle of Druidism. But the connection between Druids and Stonehenge is, I would say, demonstrably not real. That said, though, Stonehenge has demonstrably been appropriated by many cultures over its thousands of years of existence. The original people who built the first element of Stonehenge, the successive generations who added to and changed the monument over time, eventually Bronze Age and Beaker people coming in and burying themselves around in the landscape around the monument and in the immediate vicinity of the monument. These people were anchoring themselves to the past, using what had come before. And in many ways, arguably, the Druidic claims on the monument are very much the same. So while the first thing I would say is it's not true, they're not connected, arguably this is simply the latest appropriation of the monument by a cultural or religious interest group. So in some ways, like it or not, and indeed archaeologists are seemingly to blame for this, this is simply the latest chapter in the story of that monument. That said, though, when it comes to this direct claim, archaeologists are still trying to understand what this monument is about. Making claims that 5,000-year-old remains can be easily understood as being guardians to a monument, or being of a royal line, when there's no evidence that, for example, Druids had royalty. Making these sort of claims without substantial evidence or without anything other than a feeling, a sentimentality, as it were, about the monument, these are not well-founded arguments. So in that sense, I would very much say that Mr. Pendragon again is wrong. This is a feeling that he's having. These are ideas that he and his people are having based upon an attachment, a perceived attachment with the monument. That said, though, the argument about decency is a very good one. The idea that human remains deserve respect, that they shouldn't just be put on display for people to gawp at and take photos of and tap on the glass and all this kind of thing, is a very good point to raise. But also, as well, as an archaeologist, I have to say that actually these issues are things which archaeologists and curators and the people who put together these exhibitions and who research these sites, we agonise over these decisions all the time. The number of seminars, the number of curators with whom I've spoken to about this issue, who genuinely sometimes keep themselves up at night wondering about whether or not what they're doing is decent, whether or not this particular way of displaying someone is in fact humane. It really sort of, I think, shines a light on how respectful archaeologists are of the human remains and of the sites in question. So, I suppose, all in all, both sides have a point. Mr. Pendragon has a point in so much as decency has to be considered. When it comes to displaying human remains, absolutely decency must be considered. However, I would argue that his point, his direct connection with the monument, does fall down when we start to look at the roots of this perceived connection between the two. However, English Heritage do, and are, in fact, actually, they do have a duty to, and they are responding to genuine interest groups who are linked with the monument. As I say, this is just the latest chapter of people linked with Stonehenge. And in that respect, English Heritage are actually doing, indeed rather have done, this story a service. They've done it a measure of respect by actually commenting on it. But I think that's as far really as English Heritage and archaeologists really should be obliged to go. We know that the monument is not linked with Druids. We know the landscape is not directly linked with Druidism, certainly not modern Druidism. And indeed, we're just starting to understand what the monument means. In fact, the fact that the monument actually is part of a broader landscape in which there are at least two major connected monuments, but many, many others which have this complicated web of meaning, really shows that actually what we're helping to do here is to understand the monument in the landscape, and in many ways having what we found displayed is a really good way of communicating that to the public. I suppose the cynic in me would say if you claim to know everything about Stonehenge already, why haven't you shown archaeologists where to look in the landscape and what's important and what these connections and associations are? But I'm not usually that cynical, so I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say you don't know anything, because there is that connection. You do have that legitimate interest group connection with Stonehenge. But I would say ultimately, no, I don't think Mr. Pendragon has a point or a legitimate claim, and I think English Heritage have managed this most recent protest well by pointing to authenticity, and by pointing to the fact as well that they do not lightly put human remains on display. These are issues which we tackle and wrestle with every day as archaeologists, and thankfully we're being trusted to do so in this case. The law is on our side, on English Heritage's side as it were, and when it comes to Mr. Pendragon, he also has the right of reply. He has a right to protest, and I'm happy to see that he is pursuing that right to challenge with vigour. Now there is one very final point to make, and that is that arguably the only reason why we don't care, or rather why we don't care more, is because we are so far removed from the people in time, that is, who made the monument. Many people in Britain undoubtedly share a genetic link with the people who probably made the monument, the people in that landscape. Indeed, there will be some people who still live in the landscape who are in some way connected to the people who built the monument. And the only reason why we don't care is because we don't remember who built them. And when you look at other situations, and actually this has come up in conversations with Rhys Booth recently in Australia, when you look at other situations where people have a very direct, very passionate and strong cultural connection to the landscape that they're living in, and their perceived, or in many cases real, ancestry, the situation becomes much, much more complicated. So I suppose I would say that actually there is something to be said for the fact that there is something a little bit sad about the fact that we do pluck remains out of the ground, remains of people who are probably in some way related to us out of the ground. But because of that distance of time, and because we're aching to understand more about these people, I would say so long as that plucking, so long as that research is done with the right attitude, and I'm happy to say the people who research Stonehenge and the landscape and the environment do it with the right attitude. So long as it's done with the right attitude, this is good archaeology, and it will benefit us all. We will all begin to understand the monument in new, exciting ways, in better, more nuanced and elegant understandings, descriptions, and explanations. And this will also benefit the Druids. They will understand their monument even more. So it's a very complicated situation, and I suppose that is what I have to say on the matter. Hopefully this hasn't been too disappointing for you who wanted me just to go, "Ah, Druids!" and just put on some boxing gloves. But it's a situation which I have actually covered before. I believe actually this was covered in a video which was lost when a big batch of videos were deleted from the Archaeosoup YouTube channel. This is something which I have covered before, but I thought I'd return to this topic because it is current and it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. But it is nonetheless fascinating. It's a really interesting case study, and there are legitimate points made on both sides, like it or not, even though Mr. Pendragon is certainly, I mean, for example, one of my friends on Facebook apparently nearly got punched in the face by Arthur Pendragon after claiming that his claims to the monument were dubious. He didn't use the word dubious, but yeah. So yes, people get very passionate about this stuff. But I'm hoping that that by doing good research and doing it well and doing it with the best intentions in mind, we will all benefit from the work which is being done at Stonehenge. So there you go. Until next time, please do take care. Bye bye.